Welcome to BizLounge. Satyan Gajwani, CEO of Times Internet, the digital arm of the Times of India Group, India's largest media company, joins us today. Satyan, who's 28 years old, is married to the Times Group vice chairman's daughter and has been at the helm of Times Internet for a year now. He talks to us about the changes he's made to the company and his big plans for the future.
I've been working with the Times Group for about 4 years, a little over 4 years. I joined in Bennett Coleman, which is the group company, working on general business development and on the group's digital strategy. And about a year ago, I moved into this role of being the CEO of Times Internet. And so the difference is, before I used to be able to talk about digital strategy and then walk away and do something else. Today I'm expected to actually do the digital strategy, and so it's a little bit more hands-on than it was before. Today, Times Internet operates 15 to 20 different businesses with over 2,500 employees, and varying everywhere from e-commerce to news to music streaming to video streaming to local city guides to mobile operator-related services across a huge gamut of different online services. We need to excel at, and what we do excel at, is building out consumer-facing digital products. To build great digital products, you have to know and live and breathe and be a part of that digital ecosystem. It can't be something where I can read a PowerPoint presentation and then tell someone else to go build it. You have to really know it, inside of you. And for me, I grew up in the US, I went to Stanford, and essentially half of my friends dropped out of school and started some of the companies you know today. And so I've sort of been bred around a very digital ecosystem, and so when people interact with me, they get a sense probably that I have a pretty natural understanding of digital products.
Satyan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so Times Internet has been around since 1999, and today you have a portfolio of web and internet businesses. Tell us about some of the changes you've made since you've gotten to the organization.
Sure. So I've been CEO of Times Internet for about 1 year now, and it's a very unique business because it has a lot of different businesses operating, and in the digital space, everything is sort of in an investment mode for a long time. So it was a very unique portfolio to inherit in that sense. But I think there's been really 3 major changes that we've made to try to orient ourselves better for success. First is that as a company, we've set our priorities more on being successful in the product and technology, more than just on the content side, which is a little bit weird for a media company traditionally. But we've said, rather than being a content company that uses technology, we should be a technology company that uses content. And so that means more rigor on things like back-end and on development and on information architecture and all these very technical things. Second is that most digital businesses that are really big are really inefficient. And so that's why traditionally most media companies have not been very successful on the internet. And so our solution to that was, despite the fact that we have 2,500 employees and run a lot of different businesses, rather than thinking of ourselves as one large internet business that I'm the CEO of, instead we really perceive ourselves more as a collective of startups, each with their own mission, identity, sense of ownership, and their own leaders. So I was very clear from the day I took this job that I don't want to run a single business because I don't have the personal bandwidth to do so. And each of our businesses has 10 competitors. It needs a leader who is passionate and driven behind that business.
So how many of your businesses are profitable and how many aren't?
So not many. I don't think we're not at the stage yet where any or maybe a very small number of our businesses are generating profit, and if that meaningful profit. But that's not really the benchmark for us today. And it sounds a little weird because we are a corporate entity. But our interest today, and I think this is probably some of the mistakes that we've made in the past, is that we've been too centric around which businesses are breaking even, which businesses are profitable. Today, our attitude is which businesses are winning. And if our businesses are winning, then what's the prospect and what's the next step in evolution for that business? And so then the question is, does this business have a chance of winning, or is it in a leadership position? And if not, then we have to have a more hard conversation about it. But if so, then we may say, let's lose more money behind this business because we think that it's going to establish a better opportunity going forward.
How much money are you investing in your various businesses?
So it varies business to business. In aggregate, across all of our digital businesses, it would be probably a few hundred crores, maybe 150 to 250 crores. But it's very opportunistic. There may be some business that we say we should put 50 crores or 75 crores behind. Right. There may be some where we say we'll put 2 crores and see what happens. Right. I mean, we have an incubation arm called T Labs, which puts 10 lakhs into different companies. I mean, we really look at a very different spectrum of investment. And it's purely based on what the business needs.
And how is Times Internet different from the rest of the Times Group businesses?
That's a good question. I've been fortunate that I've had a lot of freedom to shape Times Internet to be whatever made sense for Times Internet. And I think unlike most media businesses, Times Internet has to operate very differently to have a chance of success. The major reason why it's different is that unlike a TV business or a print business or a radio business, where you have a finite number of competitors because not everyone can afford to launch a satellite or set up a printing press or establish radio towers. We have infinite competition because the cost of setting up a website is, it's nothing, right? It's 2 guys in a garage for a couple of months and a bunch of Maggi noodles, and that's enough to start something. Right. So structurally and spiritually, we've had to say that our business has to be very flat. It has to be very people-centric and not capital-centric necessarily. And so everything about empowering our leaders and setting these up to be small entrepreneurial units, they're not preferences, they're requirements for us. If we don't do that, we won't be able to succeed.
And generally, what's your take on the future of this space, given that some of the best companies in this realm who've been at it for a while still aren't profitable?
One of the major differences about India versus, say, the US is that the time and scale required before you say you become an established digital business is way longer, right? So Groupon launched and within 2 years IPO'd in the US. In India, there would be very few digital stories that took less than 10 years to hit an established position. And so that's why you have very few digital sort of IPOs, so to speak. So I think the biggest challenge with the internet is that unlike other industries, it is very much winner take all. It's not an industry generally that allows 5 people to have successful ventures. And so the risk-reward dynamics of the industry are just very weird. And that's why most big companies have not done well with it, because a big company is used to saying, I invest 100 crores, I have a 70-80% chance of making that money back and then some as a return. I launch a new retail store, I do this, it happens, it's traditional. Here, you can be Microsoft and spend $1 billion launching Bing.com, and at the end of the day have very little to show for it. Which is a scary proposition. There's no industry really outside of the digital world where you can put $1 billion in and end up with something that may have no value back. And so it's just a very weird risk-reward appetite.
Interesting, Satyan. We have to take a quick break here.
Sure.
Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to BizLounge. We're in conversation with Satyan Gajwani, CEO of Times Internet. And now we'll take a look at how this young leader takes charge of an organization of 2,500 employees.
My leadership style is certainly untraditional in India for a couple of reasons. One, I have an American upbringing, and so culturally there's some elements of adaptation that I'm learning to have and that the company is learning to have to me. And second, because I'm young. I'm 27 or 28. So the joke we have is over the last 10 years, the first Times Internet CEO was, say, 50. And then the one after that was maybe 40. And then the one after that was the last one, Rishi, was 35. And I'm 28. And so the joke we say is the next CEO will be 18 or 19 years old, approximately.
The young people, they need to be treated differently. You can't kind of, shove hierarchy down their throat. So he works like beautifully with all of those people. And he's an entrepreneur at heart.
Today we work more like startup. So the culture today in the entire organization and within individual business units is that of a very, very young organization, a very, very nimble organization.
It's like crazy because I've been to so many of these meetings where, this young boy and, in his pink jeans and his white shirt pulled out, comes in with a sling bag, and then you have half the room saying, "Oh my God," and then suddenly he opens his mouth, and that's it. He goes for the kill, right?
You have to be as analytical, as prepared, and have a deep understanding of what exactly is going on, because he is in a state of perpetual preparedness, I would say.
So you've been very open about the fact that you being married to co-promoter Samir Jain's daughter probably had a significant impact as to why you're CEO of Times Internet today. But that being said, tell us what you want to be measured by and what's the legacy you want to leave behind.
Yeah, so it's very weird being 28 and being responsible for a business of this scale. Yeah. But I don't think that was I believe that this business needs a very young leader to have a chance of success. Mm-hmm. There's a difference when you've grown up and really lived a digital business to understand what it means to build one. And for me personally, I was a computer science major in school, and I grew up at Stanford, and half of my friends dropped out and started their own digital businesses. So this is more familiar territory for me than it may be for a more seasoned, older executive in a lot of situations. Mm-hmm. My goal is a very, very, very lofty one, and I don't know if we'll be able to do it. That's the big challenge. Is I want to build a successful, sustainably innovating digital company. Right? So most digital companies that are successful have one or maybe two or three really, really successful things that they've done, and then there's lots of new ideas that they're looking at. The way that I believe this will thrive is if we treat it more like an incubator of a lot of new businesses, where we're constantly trying new bets and seeing how they go. And so the big challenge and the opportunity is, can we continuously set up this ecosystem of empowering good leaders to take on businesses and business ideas, grow them to a relatively mature state, and then look at the next business as well. Before
starting with the Times Group in 2008, you worked at Lehman Brothers in New York right around the time of its collapse. Yep. Tell us about that experience, and were you there when things blew up? Yeah, so I moved straight from college. I joined Lehman Brothers. The joke that my friends tell me is I joined Lehman Brothers at its peak stock price and then watched it blow up, and then I joined Barclays. And then I moved to India in December or January 2008, mm-hmm. and within a month of that was the whole Satyam scandal. Mm-hmm. So the joke people were saying was, well, you joined Lehman, that company blew up. You moved to India, your namesake company, Satyam, I'm Satyan, but Satyam blows up. I can't wait to see what you do at Times. So it's been a little bit funny. But no, Lehman was a pretty crazy experience, right? We joined in this time of like irrational exuberance where every business is going to grow crazy well. But it was interesting because you're around all of these employees who really have been responsible for building Lehman. Lehman was sort of that underdog story, really driven by employees. A large share of the company was owned by its own employees. It was a very, very sort of homegrown, hungry story. Mm-hmm. And so you're surrounded by people who have their own wealth very much tied up with the fate of their company, and are balancing both a huge element of fear and value concerns with this bullishness to fight through it and get through it like they had done in the past. And then reality is setting in that each year the stock price went up that day a little bit, and then the next day it just continued to have this fall. So yeah. It was a pretty surreal experience in a lot of ways. And Lehman Brothers was basically your only other work experience before you joined Times Group. Yeah. So what challenges do you face as a leader of such a large organization, given that you have such little work experience?
That's one of them for me, is that I'll be very direct at times about what I think is doing well, what I don't think is doing well. And that's an adjustment for people.
So what are some of the toughest decisions you've had to make as a leader?
For us specifically, we are in the business of taking a lot of bets and accepting that some of those bets aren't going to work. And so the hardest decisions sometimes are to be able to say no, and to say that, while certain businesses you want to put more money behind and get really aggressive, that's the easy thing to do. What's hard is to tell a business you don't have that much cash. You have to figure out how to work with a smaller budget. Or even harder is to say we don't see a future in this business necessarily. We have to take the hard step of shutting it down. Yeah. And if you don't do it, you'll end up carrying on laggard businesses, and that isn't sustainable going forward. Yeah. So the hardest thing, I think, is being able to say no.
Great. Satyan, we have to take another quick break here.
Sure.
But don't go away. We'll be right back. You're watching BizLounge with Satyan Gajwani of Times Internet. And now we'll take a look at how Satyan unwinds during his free time.
I grew up in the U.S. I grew up in Miami, Florida, and enjoyed nice warm weather there. And then I went to college at Stanford University in California, after which, when I graduated, I moved to New York, lived in New York for a few years, and then moved to India about four and a half years ago. Actually, I met my wife about I met her about 7 years ago in Stanford in California, and we dated for a few years, both in California and New York. And then about 4 years ago, it made sense for both of us to move back to India and start getting involved at the Times Group. When I do have free time, first and foremost is my family. I spend time with my wife and my newborn child. But in terms of leisure activities, there's a few things. One is I'm a gadget freak. It's part of the reason why I have this job or why I like this job. And so at any given time, you'll probably see me having like a few cell phones or a few tablets or a few computers. Just today, I probably run with 6 or 7 different computers at any given time. I really enjoy water activities. So one of my favorite things is scuba diving. And so I've scuba dived in the Maldives and in Indonesia and in Hawaii and around the US. And I play table tennis a lot. I think growing up in Miami, my dad and I used to play, and so we had a table at home, and so I've gotten relatively good at that. And then the other one, which is not necessarily so popular in India, but again is a carry forward for me from America, is I play basketball. And I play a couple of times a week in Delhi, actually.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your childhood and your family back in the U.S.
Sure. So I grew up in Miami, Florida. I speak English and Spanish. And, in a normal middle-class family in the U.S. I have a brother and a sister, so I'm the baby of the family. They're both older than me. The joke I said was I always had 4 parents growing up because all of them took care of me. We've been, I don't know why, we've been very lucky. My family has had a lot of, been fairly, pretty good in what we've been able to do. My brother went to Harvard, and now he works at Google in San Francisco. My sister went to Northwestern, and now she's a lawyer. She was practicing law. Now she works in an advocacy company in Washington, D.C. And then I was able to go to Stanford and move into this digital path in its own right. So, no, we have a happy, normal family. Nothing too exciting, I guess.
Tell us about what you miss most about Miami, where you grew up.
I miss the food, honestly. It's a stupid thing, but in India we've adjusted a lot. I mean, we have a lot of great comforts here, and India is a place where if you have access to means, you can lead a very, very comfortable life, and it's great because it allows you to spend your time on the things you want to do, like work and your family, and not necessarily on doing dishes and laundry. But when you live in Miami, you have access to Venezuelan food and Cuban food and Brazilian food and Vietnamese food and this, that, and it's coming to India. But really in India, it's Chinese, Italian, and Indian food, and then some variants of those.
If you had to pick a place to bring a tourist in your hometown, where would you go?
So I actually don't even know what my hometown is, honestly, because I grew up in Miami, but I studied in San Francisco for 4 years, and then I was in New York for 2 years before that, and I kind of identify with all of them. I mean, if I was bringing someone from India to the U.S., it would definitely be New York. New York is the first place, because New York is this weird place where, within a very small area, you have like 50 different pockets of life. Like there are different cultures and different people and different businesses, and you can walk between all these different neighborhoods that are essentially like little countries within a small microcosm.
Yeah. What do you enjoy most about living in India?
I love that you have so much ownership over your time. I mean, honestly, I think the best part about India for me is that you have this great infrastructure which allows you to spend your mind share and your energy share on the things you care about. I mean, in the U.S., you don't have that luxury. I mean, you leave work at 6 or whatever in the U.S., and then you come home and you have to cook dinner, and you have to do laundry, and you have to clean your rooms, and you have to do this, that. And so, today I can come home at 7 or 7:30 and spend time with my wife and our baby, and then, actually continue to work a little more, or whatever it is I want to do, but you have the time to spend on the things you care about.
Sure.
And that's really nice.
And what are some of the biggest things you've had to get used to living here?
Service cultures are really different from America. So in America, you will generally find solutions that don't require as much people, whereas in India, you find everything needs people. And so, you know, the first example that got me was when I was at home and we looked at the garden. There was a lawnmower, which is like this machine, and there was 2 people pulling it and 1 person pushing it. And I found it so funny because it was this rudimentary machine that 3 people needed, whereas in America you have 1 machine and 1 guy sits on it and he manages it. But because the cost of labor is lower here, it's actually cheaper to buy a cheaper machine and have people than have a fancier machine and not have people. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing, I think, is that I think these dynamics are really changing. I mean, labor cost is going to increase in India very, very consistently. Mm-hmm. And it will force Indian companies and people to think more efficiently and to think about times when you don't need 10 people to do something if you can figure out a product or a technology that lets you use 2 people. Mm-hmm. And I can see it around us in every element of the whole group. We're increasingly trying to find more efficient ways of doing things, not just necessarily bulking up on manpower.
Okay, we're going to ask you what some of your preferences are now.
Ooh, okay.
Summer or winter?
But I do different things, yeah, it's not fair. In summer, I would love to go scuba diving. In winter, I'd love to go skiing.
Okay. Salty or sweet?
Both. I don't like choosing. I like salty, and then I love sweet. I have a disproportionate love of sweets.
Too. Okay. Books or movies?
Movies.
Socks or slippers?
Slippers.
Swimming or skiing?
Just because you can't do it as often, skiing.
Flying or driving?
Flying.
Flip-flops or sneakers?
Flip-flops. I'm a California guy. I mean, flip-flops are what I grew up in.
And if you were given one superpower, would you want to fly, be invisible, or the fastest person on the planet?
Either fly or be invisible. Flying because it'd just be, you know, it would be a unique thing. But invisible, I think, is probably more interesting because you can just create exposures to things you wouldn't necessarily be able to.
Okay, great, Satyan. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was fun.
And that's it for today. We'll see you next time on BizLounge.